The bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Melanie. How's it going?
I'm so glad that you're here today. This is Elementary School Season 1. This is behind the scenes of a special needs child. And meet Rachel Parry, the parent and teacher. She offers hope and guidance for families looking to get services and help for their child. And you are such a hero to me because I've seen just from a distance, but I've seen your life. And can I just tell you a couple things? When I returned to teaching in 2014, I don't know if you remember the schools, but when we were at the same school for a little while, you had been there, but your son, Carson, with special needs, he is such a sweetheart. I returned at first as the music teacher, just to see if I had.
remember that,
Do
yeah.
you remember that? And actually, it was the same principal that kind of talked you into a couple of things, and she was so cute. And I'd been home for
Yeah.
about 12 years with my kids, and I said, I don't know if I have enough management skills left. And so she said, come test it out in music class. And so that kind of shaped me up. But what I remember about Carson is he just would always be smiling, and however he interpreted the music and moved his body, like that's one of the best things about it, and kids loved it.
Yeah.
So that was
he enjoys music. That's a saving grace for him. Yeah.
So I want to
No.
start just by telling you, first of all, you're one of the heroes. But will you introduce yourself and give some background as both a parent and an educator? And then I'd like to kind of jump into your story.
But so as a parent, you come into this. I remember when Carson was 3 years old, we'd done early intervention. This is when I knew more stuff about what was going on with him. And they were like, well, he needs to start preschool. And I was thinking, oh, I'm not letting him out of this house. He's not going to preschool. I got to just keep him in this bubble and keep him safe and all this stuff. And then I was doing the early intervention. Assistants would come to the house and stuff, and they kind of talked me into it. So I'm like, all right, I'll try it for a day or so. So I did, and it was really good for him. And also, I didn't let him take the bus, and it was like 5 blocks away. It was like the early enrichment program, and I'm like, no, that's too much. And they're like, just let us put him on the bus, and he thought it was the most exciting thing to ride the bus, and it was so cute. So my point being is that as a parent, you're so nervous to send them out there. And are people going to understand all these things about him and why he's doing this or that? Because you're just learning it. And then as a teacher or an assistant on the other end, they're just they get this child who they're just meeting, and they're trying to figure out all of their stuff. But it's like two very opposite ends trying to work together. So sometimes my frustration comes, and I know this sounds bad, but I am big about the fact that I had that child. He came from me, I had him. He is the way he is, and it was genetic, and I had no idea because of me. That's not their fault that he's having issues.
Right.
I brought him in here. So when some people are quick to be angry or frustrated with teachers or assistants or they're not getting this, I'm thinking, look, they're just here to help. They're doing their best, most of them, and they just want the same outcome, a good outcome like them. So I think a lot of them, I think about a lot of them as angels for being in this field. And it has high turnover. It has, people that need to retire or need to find something else because they're worn out. But it also has a lot of amazing people that have the same interests you do. And so you just kind of have to realize that you're both trying to work together, hopefully in the situation you're in.
Thank you. Let's explain that a little so that people know what it's like.
Right.
So we have, a typical public school has a special education program at the school, which typically means a pullout. So the child probably is mainstreamed into a regular classroom for a great part of the day and then pulled into special education for core subjects or at certain times. What was it like for you with elementary school with Carson?
So with elementary school, Carson would be mainstream in the classroom and just going out to the other classrooms for things like he would do PE, where he would throw the ball and do things with them. He would do all those other things, music, library. But his general area was in the classroom. So the ones that are going outside and spending more time out there, I just think the biggest thing has been, and it's such a good thing, how they've mainstreamed. Because I remember when Carson was first in kindergarten, and I brought in this poster with all these pictures of him and all this stuff he does that we all do, jumping where we put on the trampoline and all this stuff and go places, go to Lagoon. And I wanted to make these kids all aware that, not to be afraid of him, and that even though he can't speak and he does have some interesting behaviors, that they could get to know him and it would be okay. So I did a lot of that in the first years of kind of trying to educate the kids to what was going on with him so they wouldn't be afraid. Like, I have to do what I can to help these mainstream classrooms understand, and then also the special needs. You kind of have to go between both because they're getting totally different experiences in each classroom.
So when was he diagnosed, and what is his diagnosis?
Okay, so his diagnosis is so crazy. It's called muscle eye brain disease. That's what it's called. And then a part of that is congenital muscular dystrophy. So that's having muscular dystrophy since birth. The type of brain he has is called cobblestone lissencephaly. And so it's a different looking brain. It has all its parts, but some parts are smaller than they should be or larger. And his whole frontal lobe was blank, which was terrible because that's where you make decisions, right, wrong. So we knew we had to teach him all this and hope it all just kind of. So
How
so
old
then
how old
sorry,
is he now?
he is 18.
He's 18.
18 years old.
And
Yeah, so we did all this and we did a skin biopsy. The final information that was muscle eye brain, like the whole thing came in when he was 4 years old. So it took till he was 4 years old to get the final diagnosis from information sent up to Canada, and their scientists did all the work and brought it back, and that's when we knew looking at. So yeah,
what is
nothing
his level of understanding?
So that's what everybody asks, and it's so hard to gauge because every area seems different at times. But I would say around 3 to 4 years old. But it really is, yeah. He's just kind of so still in that little bit of that toddler stage too.
Yes.
So it's the best of time and the worst of time.
Right. You have a toddler for 18 years so far.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. I'm like, wow, I am really being schooled in this from the deep.
We are all being schooled.
I can be. But yeah.
Well, one thing I love about you is your positivity and how that has shaped your experience, because you have been working with special needs children in the classroom, and you're always so positive, and you're positive with your own son. And I'm sure it's a lot of work. One thing that stood out to me is when I texted you about this, I don't know, I said something like, I'm sorry, it's kind of early in the morning. And you responded back and you said, hey, as a special needs mom, and 8 a.m. is like lunchtime.
It can be. It can be. When they wake up and they're staring at you at 3 in the morning or 4 and they're like, what are we going to do now? You're like, oh, no.
Well, you talk about when you, just to be clear, when you said he was in a classroom, you mean like functional skills?
A functional skills classroom, yes.
Yes. So will you explain what functional skills for anyone that doesn't know?
That's their main home classroom, and that's where they work on like their IEP goals, things like that, and which I can explain too. But those are basically their yearly goals, and you do a big meeting for that every year with teachers and principal and everyone there, and go over goals and things that you're working on. But anyway, so that's where they work on all of that stuff, and then they do other fun stuff in there too. But it's mostly goal oriented, and then they get pulled out for the other stuff. But that's because a lot of these people are trained, and there's files on these separate kids and all the stuff they need to do, and getting them kind of passed off in trying to get them to kind of move forward, as they age. But yeah.
And yeah, I would like to walk through. So IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. And that doesn't necessarily mean that can happen for a disability. It can happen for many reasons. So any parent out there like, hey, we're having an issue, or I think my child is struggling with dyslexia, anything, then we can schedule an IEP, which is what you are referring to.
It's really good. It's good because then teachers that are in the mainstream classroom also can read this and and they get the idea of, these children that are coming in their class and things that, it's good for everyone to have background and a place to start. So these yearly meetings, and the therapists are all there, and everybody kind of gets on the same page for the year. And that's what it's about.
So does this happen like at kindergarten, like day one? You
Mhm.
hadn't,
It happens day one,
yeah.
and it goes all the way up till they're 18.
And
So,
in elementary school, how big was his class, would you say? How many students and how many teachers?
in his elementary school, I would say most of his classrooms had about, it would be around 10 to 15 kids. And then there would be one teacher and hopefully three assistants at least.
Do you feel like there are times where you have had to really advocate for him?
Yeah, I have. Because that child cannot talk for themselves. So you worry when you send them off, you
Yes.
worry that they're getting the right treatment they need and that people are understanding what they need. And if
Yeah.
they aren't, or they just don't want to see it from that point of view or whatever, then sometimes it's better to just start over with someone else who may have better education in that area or better,
Well,
it's not
what
everybody
I want,
matches the.
yes, what I want parents to know from that is that it is okay to speak up, that you do know your child best, and it happens in a regular classroom as well. Like there's just certain things that we might not know as teachers, and so we love it when a parent speaks up and says, I'm feeling this way, or this is what we're seeing, or these are some things that help with this
Yeah.
specific issue. It's always helpful. Can you tell me about times where you've seen teachers and, just like you're saying, other functional skills aides and other classroom help that advocated for Carson too, that you saw it
Oh
from the
yeah,
teacher angle?
I've seen. Oh my gosh, I've seen so many people hours and hours into goals and figuring out what would work best. Bringing stuff into the classroom that might make them more comfortable, making areas for them that might make them feel safer or feel like that's more of what they need, working different techniques that maybe the other kids aren't doing, but they're doing focused on in a different area a little bit. And a lot of the time they spend, like a lot of teachers, their own money to do this and to do whatever they can because they really just want to help. How they're going to make all these goals work and how they're and come up with all these ideas and work with parents. And it's just amazing how much they put into it that people don't see behind the scenes beyond just working with them in the day and just loving them and
Yes,
caring about them and wanting the best for them, feeding them. Well, I've had kids where I had to do the feeding tubes on them after they ate. You learn all these skills. You go to all these classes during the school year for defense and safety and passing off stuff. So it's not just like someone comes in there off the street and there's a lot of training that goes on and they go through a lot to try to help these kids
they
and
do.
get them where they need to go.
I
So,
see that every day, and we have functional skills classroom at our school, and highly trained people, and they love the kids, and it is a hard job.
yeah, and they love those kids. Like the kid gets done having, a moment, whatever, and you're just like, hey, now we just move on. And now he was big about not eating. That was his control as a kid. So he wouldn't eat for you. So he was on carnation and Pediasure up till he was almost 6. Then he
Wow.
comes into school and they go to the school classroom and the lunchroom and everybody's eating lunch and he's like, I don't know, this kind of looks good, whatever. So he starts eating more, doing what they're doing. And it took him a while to still do that, to start eating in front of us. But watching the other kids do these things, he liked the independence and kind of being in his own thing with these kids.
And it's so good for the other students.
Oh,
It
yeah.
really is. So,
Yeah.
because one thing that I was just telling a friend this the other day, that I think I don't know why I'm calling it an art, but the art of nurturing is something that, our kids get really disconnected now, and they have their phones. Even young kids have their phones and their devices, and there's all this disconnect, and the art of nurturing really is an art. And I think one thing that it helps with, by having Carson and other special needs students being in the classroom and getting a lot of experience with other students, is for them to like you said, learn acceptance and love and to nurture and to really
Yeah.
their own skills with that. So,
Yeah, true. He had a lot of really good friends in elementary school and even through junior high, but high school, those kids, they would take him to class with them and um, they had to learn how to do certain things with him, and it
yes,
was really good for them too. They would just love to get that credit, to come in there. And
absolutely.
he had one peer tutor send a letter that said something like, some days I didn't want to get up, I didn't want to go to school, but knowing that I needed to be there to take Carson to seminary, you know, I did it. So I just want to thank you for being, a reason. I don't even want to get emotional, but I've seen it touch
Love
other
that.
kids, and this was a boy, a boy was like, I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to go to school today. But he knew that he needed to be in there for Carson and different things. So I just think it's wonderful.
I
Yeah,
love
it's a
that
great.
story. That's huge
Yeah,
because it was a nurturing way for him in his life and that he was taking responsibility. He knew that his job
right.
being a peer tutor. And so I think more of that is needed. It is a wanted job at the junior high and the high school, and we need more of that. I love it. What would you say are a couple of things that you have learned by having your sweet Carson?
I would say a couple things, obviously, which I'm big about is flexibility. Things don't always go right. And I know that's with every kid, but I can be so sure that I've got it figured out how this is going to work or that's going to work with him. And it just doesn't. Do your plans. And that brings me to another thing is boundaries. Even with family, friends, I I tended to be like a people pleaser. I wanted to make everything work out. Let's do this. And then it came to the point where it was like, if it's going to be after this time, we can't do it because Carson's really just not going to do well this time, or we can't this, or if we can do it at my house and do it this way. And you don't need to feel bad about that because a lot of the time you'll find people are fine with that and they want you there and they want to make things work and have you be a part of things. But sometimes if you just can't, period, and it's just not going to work, even through holiday stuff, you can't hit every holiday thing.
It's
You don't need to
okay.
feel bad about it. And also to expect the unexpected with him. I mean, when he was young, they're like, what can he do? And he'd learn certain things and then he would relapse and not. And I remember at one point, every year at the doctor, they say, can he point? And I'm like, no. And then one day when he was almost about 7, I was showing him this and I'm like, well, what one would you want? And he just put his hand up and pointed.
What I'm hearing from you too is, we have to go where the child is. And as a mom,
Yeah.
you can do that. It's difficult sometimes as the teacher because we don't know exactly where the
Yeah.
child is, but we're figuring it out. And I love that idea of go where the child is. And then with the pointing story that he is capable and he can do some things and that you just worked
And
with
he'll
him
do
and
it when he
with
wants.
him. Yeah, yeah, when he wants to. And that's
I think, yeah, the sense of humor is a big thing to me just because, oh, if you
yeah,
don't have that in this, it is really hard not to get depressed,
sure.
not to get over. And I felt that before. Believe me, I don't wake up every day. I mean, and not that, and I've had to use depression meds. I've had to do things at different times, switch things up, do other things because it takes a toll on your mind and physically and
Yeah.
everything. And that's okay that, to admit or to use that. It's better to ask for help, let other people help you. That's another thing. I was terrible at letting people help me. And you got to accept help. That's one thing too I've learned is you really need to just accept the help because it is a rough world. I mean, it's a wonderful world, but it's a rough world and you will burn out.
Thank
So,
you. That is a huge point. I love the honesty and the
yeah.
advice that you give so that others feel like it's okay, get help.
Yeah.
And just your teaming with you and the teachers and the peer tutors, everyone that has been in Carson's corner, that you've really worked with them. And I think that's another huge piece of why things have gone well for him and for you. But absolutely, your sense of humor tops things off with like a nice cherry on top. Will you tell me what hope can you offer? I think a lot of that is very hopeful, but just any other thing you want to add hope to a family that is maybe facing this for the first time or has been in it for a while and that they're wearing down. What hope can
I
you?
want to do one thing before that, and that is get on the lists for help when they're the youngest you can. It takes forever to get approved. Carson was 12, and I had been working since he was 2. And here he is in, the situation he is in. and it took me that long to get him Medicaid and help with disabilities and all that, DSPD and all that stuff. It is a godsend when you get it to have that assistance and help with everything, diapering, all the stuff, the supplies, the respite help. I do have, a certain amount of hours I can have respite come in and help, so I can go out and get other things done. A big thing I would say to these families that are going through this is that they've got to make time, that parent, mom, dad, for themselves. Self-care is huge. It is huge. And I didn't do enough of that when I was younger with him. I just felt it was all, you devote everything to your kids, your family, you come last. That's absolutely not okay. You've got to detach from that caretaker feeling for 2 seconds, because it's with you 24/7. But until you do that, or take a longer bath, or do this, when they go to school, if you have a child that's going to school, don't pack your whole day with stuff top to bottom before they get back. Do a couple things that are just more relaxing for you, because if you don't, you do get to a point where your brain is just fried and you don't have enough to give to anyone at that point.
Yes, I do try to end with a little Christian thought. And the one, especially as you were talking, I was thinking about, there's this favorite part that I have in the Bible when Jesus blesses the children.
Right.
And it says, and he took them in his arms and he put his hands on them and blessed them. And just by hearing what you're talking about, like you are doing God's work with your child, and these teachers are doing God's work with your child. And I really felt that from you today. Thank you.
I'm glad.
That's huge.
Talk about it.
He's come with some special gifts, and you have embraced that in your family.
Yeah, we have. He's been a delight in so many ways. So yes.
Thank you so much. This has been an important interview, I think, for a lot of people. So thank you. I wish you the best. You're just such a great person. Thank you for helping in the classroom and for sharing your story.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks for being part of today's class. To submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.